Imagine an artist uh, who basically single-handedly reshaped modern hip-hop.
Right.
Someone universally revered as a genius by his peers. Now imagine that same artist completely refuses to show his face. Like, ever.
Yeah. Performing a literal metal mask.
Exactly. And sometimes he doesn't even show up at all. He regularly sends imposters to perform his concerts while fans are literally rioting in the crowd.
It's wild.
It is. And ultimately, despite shaking the very sound of American underground music, this artist dies in exile from the country he helped culturally define.
I mean, if you wrote that in a script, it sounds entirely like the plot of a comic book.
Oh, 100%.
But today we are talking about a real person.
We are diving deep into the life of Daniel Dumile, globally known as the underground hip-hop supervillain MF Doom.
Villain himself.
Our mission today is to unpack the massive stack of sources on Dumile's life. We really want to understand how profound tragedy birthed the character that forever changed music, and, what his journey teaches us about identity, resilience, and the rigid systems of both the music industry and immigration.
It really is a modern myth.
Right.
And it's a story that requires looking far past the surface level of the mask.
Yeah, so whether you are a lifelong hip-hop head who can spot every obscure cartoon sample on his albums, or you're just insanely curious about enigmatic musical figures.
You want to know how a masked supervillain conquered the underground.
Exactly. This deep dive is for you. We are going to connect the dots of Doom's labyrinthine life. But to understand the villain, we have to start with the man. Where does the origin story actually begin?
It starts across the Atlantic, actually. Daniel Dumile was born in 1971 in Hounslow, London. His mother was Trinidadian and his father was Zimbabwean.
But that UK chapter was incredibly brief.
Very brief. As a child, his family moved to Long Beach, New York.
Right, but they moved on a non-immigrant B visa.
Correct. And a B visa is typically a temporary visitor visa, usually for business or tourism.
It doesn't grant permanent residency.
No, it doesn't. And that legal technicality might seem minor when you're just a kid running around Long Beach, but it sets a precarious foundation that becomes absolutely pivotal decades later.
Wow, yeah. And his childhood environment was also super foundational to his worldview, right? Because I know his family was highly political.
Very much so. He grew up in a household deeply influenced by Black nationalism and the Islamic faith, specifically as part of the 5% Nation.
Can you break that down a bit for someone who might not be familiar?
Sure. So the 5% Nation is a socio-religious movement. It branched off from the Nation of Islam, and it places a massive emphasis on self-knowledge, Black empowerment, and the idea that the original people of the world are divine.
Okay, got it.
Plus, his father was actively teaching him Pan-African history, making sure he knew about figures like Marcus Garvey.
So from day one, Dumile is steeped in this hyper-awareness of systemic racial dynamics. But at the same time, he's also just a kid in New York in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He was just a regular kid who obsessed over comic books. In fact, his childhood nickname among his friends and family was simply Doom.
Just Doom.
Yeah, it's just a phonetic play on his last name, Dumile. And he was completely drawn to music early on. He started to DJ all the way back in the 3rd grade.
Which naturally leads us to his first real run at the music industry. We hit 1988, and Dumile forms a hip-hop group called KMD.
And he didn't do it alone. He formed KMD with his younger brother, who went by DJ Subrock. Dumile took on the stage named Zev Love X.
Zev Love X. I mean, that feels so far removed from the supervillain persona he'd eventually adopt. It sounds so...
Optimistic.
Yeah, optimistic.
It really was. They were young, they were ambitious, and they were gaining real traction. They actually got signed to Elektra Records. Dumile made his recording debut on a track by the group Third Base.
Oh, wait, this is the track where he coined the phrase the gas face, right?
That's the one.
And for anyone wondering, giving someone the gas face basically meant giving them a look of disrespect or dismissal.
Yeah, it caught on quickly. KMD released their debut album, Mr. Hood, in 1991, and the future looked incredibly bright. They were working on their highly anticipated sophomore album, Black Bastards.
Things were looking so incredibly promising for them, but right on the verge of that breakout moment, tragedy strikes. Okay, let's unpack this because this is the moment Dumile's world completely shatters.
Yeah. In 1993, just before Black Bastards was supposed to drop, Dumile's younger brother and main collaborator, DJ Subrock, was struck and killed by a car while crossing the Long Island Expressway.
God.
He was only 19 years old.
It's hard to even fathom that kind of loss. Your creative partner, your sibling, just gone in an instant.
And Dumile had to finish that album completely alone over the next several months. He was entirely enveloped in grief.
But the industry didn't give him space to grieve, did they?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Almost immediately, the industry turned its back on him. Elektra Records dropped KMD and completely shelved the Black Bastards album.
Just flat out refused to release it. And the label's stated reason was the controversial cover art.
Yes. The cover featured a cartoon of a stereotypical Sambo caricature, a deeply racist historical trope being hanged. KMD's intention was to subvert and destroy that racist imagery.
Right.
But Elektra panicked over potential backlash, cut their ties, and walked away.
So Dumile loses his brother, his record deal, and his livelihood in one devastating swoop. He went from being a rising star to, in his own words, damn near homeless, walking the streets of Manhattan and sleeping on benches.
He was completely adrift.
And then he just vanishes. From roughly 1994 to 1997, Daniel Dumile is a ghost in the hip-hop scene. He eventually retreats down to Atlanta, Georgia.
What's fascinating here is how Dumile processed this dual trauma during that exile.
Yeah.
He wasn't just grieving the immense personal loss of Sub Rock. He felt deeply deformed by the music industry.
Deformed in what way?
In the sense that they took his art, capitalized on his youthful energy, and then threw him away the second things got complicated.
Yeah.
And all while he was mourning his brother. He was in Atlanta recovering from his wounds, but he was also actively vowing revenge against the business. This combination of deep personal grief and intense institutional betrayal set the absolute perfect stage for his reinvention.
He couldn't come back as Zev Love X. That kid was gone.
Exactly. Zev Love X died on the Long Island Expressway along with his brother. He needed a new vehicle.
And what a vehicle he built. Let's fast forward to the late 90s. We're at the New York and Poets Cafe in Manhattan. It's a legendary spot for underground hip-hop. It's an open mic night.
And a guy steps up to the mic to freestyle.
Wearing pantyhose over his head.
Literally pantyhose, completely obscuring his face.
The crowd must have been so confused, but he starts spitting and the talent is undeniable. This is the very beginning of the transformation. Slowly, the pantyhose evolves. He formally adopts a new identity. MF Doom.
And he crafts a physical mask to match the name. At first, he used a literal replica of the Marvel Comics supervillain Dr. Doom. If you look at the cover of his 1999 debut solo album, Operation Doomsday, you can clearly see the Marvel character.
Right, but you can't just use a Disney-owned trademark forever.
True. So he eventually updates the look. He gets a customized metal mask modeled after a prop helmet from the movie Gladiator. And from that point onward, Daniel Dumile rarely, if ever, made an unmasked public appearance again.
But the mask wasn't just a gimmick to get attention, was it?
Not at all. It was a profound artistic statement. Academic Harshini Bana-Young points out something brilliant here. By putting on a supervillain mask, Dumile was leaning into the role society had already assigned to him.
How do you mean?
The music industry had treated him as disposable. And historically, the dominant constructs of identity in the U.S. relegating him, as a black man, to second-class citizenship. He was already viewed by the system as a problem.
Right.
So by taking on the supervillain persona, he was basically saying, you want a villain, I'll give you the ultimate villain.
That's incredibly powerful. He's weaponizing the very stereotypes used against him.
Precisely. He combined elements of Dr. Doom, the G.I. Joe villain Destro, and the Phantom of the Opera. He even began referring to himself entirely in the third person while in character. The mask became a literal and figurative barrier between his true, vulnerable self and a world that had caused him immense pain.
I want you to think about that for a second. Imagine going through something so devastating that the only way you can step back out into the world, the only way you can protect yourself from a system that burned you, is to build a literal metal shield. A shield that protects your vulnerability, but also becomes an incredibly potent creative weapon.
And he utilized that weapon masterfully. Moving into the early 2000s, Doom enters this golden era, creating a whole web of characters.
It wasn't just MF Doom anymore.
No, it was a massive, interconnected mythology. Under the moniker King Ghidorah, which he based on a three-headed golden space dragon from the Godzilla films, he released the album Take Me to Your Leader in 2003.
A three-headed space dragon making underground hip-hop beats. You really can't make this up.
And that same year, he released Vaudeville Villain under the name Victor Vaughn. Critics described Victor as a time-traveling street hustler. He was world-building on a scale rarely seen in music.
And it all culminates in 2004 with what is widely considered his absolute masterpiece, Mad Villainy.
Yes. Recorded with the legendary producer Madlib. And then the following year, in 2005, he drops The Mouse and the Mask with producer Danger Mouse, heavily featuring characters from Cartoon Network's Adult Swim.
And that one actually hit number 41 on the Billboard 200. He's suddenly collaborating with Gorillaz, producing for Ghostface Killah, but it's his specific style that really cemented his legacy.
His lyricism is practically unmatched. It's a flow that sounds incredibly loose and conversational, almost like he's just talking to you, yet it is delivered with razor-sharp technical precision.
He used this crazy web of allusions, comic book references, metaphysics, and stream of consciousness rhymes, and his production heavily relied on these obscure cartoon samples.
Critic Chris Wagner put it perfectly when he noted Doom's willingness to embrace comedy and nerdiness without hiding behind a heavy cloak of irony. It was absurd, but it was entirely sincere in its absurdity.
But with all this massive success and critical acclaim, he never let go of that supervillain ethos, and here's where it gets really interesting. He started sending imposters to perform for him.
The infamous Doom posters.
Yes. Fans would pay their hard-earned money for a ticket, show up to a venue, the beat drops, a guy in a metal mask walks out, and the crowd slowly realizes it's not actually Daniel DiMaio. In 2010, at a show in Toronto, an imposter actually got booed off the stage before the real Doom eventually came out.
It happened frequently.
Yeah.
As recently as 2019 at the Adult Swim Festival, the masked figure on stage turned out to be the comedian Hannibal Buress.
Wait, but from a fan's perspective, isn't that just a massive scam? You pay to see your favorite artist and get a fake. Fans were absolutely furious.
This raises an important question regarding the relationship between the artist, the art, and the audience.
Wow.
How did DiMaio justify this?
Yeah, how could he justify it?
Well, in an interview with The New Yorker, he explained that he viewed himself as the writer and director of the MF Doom character. He wasn't a traditional pop star. He was running a stage play. He even said he might send a white guy next because whoever plays the character plays the character.
So the supervillain was purely an idea, a conceptual construct.
Exactly. It frustrated ticket buyers, naturally. But conceptually, it proved his ultimate point. The character was bigger than the mortal man beneath the metal. The mask was the performance.
It's brilliant in a highly confrontational way. He was constantly challenging the rules of the music industry, but there was another system, an unseen bureaucratic labyrinth that he couldn't outmaneuver. And this shifts our story into its final, much darker chapter.
The immigration system.
Yes. Remember that B visa we mentioned at the start?
Yeah.
Despite living in the United States almost his entire life, Dumiel never naturalized as a U.S. citizen. He technically remained a British citizen his whole life.
It's important to note the specifics here. When he was just 3 years old, his family was actually approved for permanent resident status. But his family lacked the funds to file the necessary paperwork at the time.
Just lack of funds to pay the filing fee kept him from legal permanence?
We're looking strictly at the facts of his immigration struggle here, as outlined in the sources. In 2004, under the immigration registry provision, Dumiel applied for permanent residency, believing he was eligible given his long-term presence in the country.
Right, he had legal assistance and everything.
He did. However, his application was officially denied by U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services in 2005.
And the breaking point finally occurred in 2010.
Yes. Dumiel acquired a British passport to go on a European tour in support of his album Born Like This. When he attempted to return to his home in the U.S., the Department of Homeland Security denied him re-entry. They found him to be unlawfully present in the United States.
Just like that, he was exiled from the country he'd lived in since 1971. He was separated from his wife, Jasmine, and their 5 children for nearly 2 years while they figured out what to do.
He eventually settled in the UK and relocated his family to London in 2012. He continued to work, of course. He collaborated on albums like 2012's Key to the Cuffs with Gennaro Gerald.
You can actually hear him directly referencing his exile on that album, utilizing Britishisms in tracks like Governor. But the separation and the forced relocation took an immense toll. He stated in interviews that he was done with the United States.
He lived his final years in Yorkshire and then Leeds. And it was in Leeds where this remarkable life came to an end.
Let's lay out exactly what happened, based on the records. In October 2020, Dumiel was admitted to St. James's University Hospital with respiratory problems. And on October 31st, 2020, Daniel Dumiel died at the age of 49.
The cause of death was angioedema. It's a severe swelling, which in his case was triggered as an adverse reaction to a blood pressure medication he had recently been prescribed.
Because of the COVID-19 lockdown protocols at the time, his wife Jasmine was not allowed to visit him in the hospital until the very day he died. And then, Jasmine kept his death a secret from the public for 2 full months. The world didn't find out until she announced it on December 31st, New Year's Eve.
And the details that came out later during the official medical inquest shed light on what occurred in the hospital.
What exactly did the inquest find?
According to the reports, his family heavily criticized the hospital's treatment. Jasmine reported that Dumile's nurse call button was placed out of his reach and that staff failed to check on him frequently enough. Lawyers for the family presented evidence that it took 2 hours to administer medication for his swollen throat, which is a highly dangerous symptom of angioedema.
And what was the hospital's response to this?
An official inquest found that the hospital's care plan lacked sufficient detail. Ultimately, the chief medical officer issued a formal apology, admitting that Dumile's treatment had been substandard.
The outpouring of grief when his death was finally announced to the public was absolutely massive. The tributes from his peers really underscore his impact on music. LP called him a writer's writer. Q-Tip called him your favorite rapper's favorite rapper.
And Tom York from Radiohead, who collaborated with him, marveled at his genius. He specifically said the way Dumile used stream of consciousness was something he'd never heard before. He left a gaping hole in the music world.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the legacy of Daniel Dumile of MF Doom is a masterclass in alchemy.
Alchemy.
Yes, it shows us that knowledge, talent, and creativity are most valuable when they are applied directly to our darkest moments. Dumile took immense, paralyzing personal grief from the loss of his brother, combined it with institutional rejection from the music industry, and used it to forge an impenetrable, unforgettable artistic universe. He didn't just survive his trauma, he weaponized it into brilliant art.
So, what does this all mean for you? When you face a system that rejects you, or you experience a setback that breaks you down to your foundations, how do you respond? Do you accept the script that you were given by the world, or do you put on a mask and write a completely new one? Because Dumile proved that sometimes the only way to be truly seen is to hide your face.
That's incredibly well said.
Before we wrap up, there is one final fascinating detail from our sources that we haven't touched on yet, and it perfectly encapsulates the strange reality of his legacy.
This is regarding the inauguration, right?
Yes. In January 2021, just weeks after the public learned of his death, MF Doom's instrumental track Coffin Nails was included on U.S. President Joe Biden's official inauguration playlist. Now, looking at this neutrally based strictly on the fan reactions, people fiercely criticized this inclusion.
They pointed out the timeline.
Exactly. Fans pointed out the paradox that Joe Biden was the vice president of the United States in 2010, the exact time when Dumile was refused re-entry and exiled from the country by the Department of Homeland Security. I want to leave you to mull over that paradox. How does the establishment eventually co-opt the art of the very villains it exiles once they're no longer around to fight back?
It's a heavy question to consider.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life and legacy of the one and only MF Doom. Keep questioning the systems around you, and as always, stay curious.